What if I told you the most disliked Friday the 13th film was directed by someone who came from the adult film world? That an actress later lost her teaching career when her students recognized her from the movie? And that the killer in this story actually murdered more people than Jason ever did? Welcome to Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, a production so wild that the chaos behind the camera might be scarier than anything that made it into the final cut. Fact number 1, the film was directed by a former adult film director. Before joining the Friday the 13th franchise, Danny Steinmann was already known in Hollywood circles for directing adult films in the late 1970s. He had a reputation for being bold, impatient, and a little unfiltered, and that carried straight into this movie. His background shaped how Part 5 looked and felt. It had more sensuality, more energy, and more shock factor than most slasher films at the time. Cast members later described the set as chaotic and uncomfortable, with Steinmann pushing scenes to extremes to grab attention. While some felt he went too far, others said that's exactly what made the movie stand out. It became known as the most daring entry in the franchise, a film that blurred the line between horror and exploitation and kept fans talking for decades. Fact number 2, the movie was secretly filmed under a fake title. When Paramount began production, they didn't want anyone to know it was a Friday the 13th sequel, so they gave it a fake title, Repetition. Even the actors were fooled. Most of them believed they were working on a serious drama about life in a mental hospital. John Shepard, who played Tommy Jarvis, took it so seriously that he spent months volunteering at a real psychiatric facility to prepare for the role. He studied patients, routines, and behaviors. He thought he was going for an award-worthy performance. When he learned he'd actually been cast in a horror sequel, he was crushed, but the secret worked. Paramount avoided leaks and fan interference, and filming wrapped before the truth spread. Unfortunately, that secrecy also left several cast members feeling deceived once they realized what kind of movie they'd really made. Fact number 3, the director's on-set behavior shocked the crew. From day one, Steinmann's directing style caused tension. He was known for being blunt and fiery, demanding reshoots, shouting over noise, and trying to energize actors with comments that often crossed professional lines. During one intimate scene, the editor later recalled that the crew sat in stunned silence watching the footage. Even the producers were alarmed by how aggressive his approach was, but the budget and schedule were too tight to replace him. For the rest of production, the cast worked around his outbursts. While his behavior made the set uncomfortable, it also gave the movie a raw, unpredictable energy that matched its chaotic tone. The result was a film that looked as unhinged as the environment it was made in, something that accidentally fit perfectly with the story's madness. Fact number 4, a 3-minute scene was cut to avoid a restricted rating. One of the most heavily edited moments in the movie was an early romantic scene that originally lasted more than 3 minutes. The ratings board flagged it immediately for being too suggestive and threatened to give the film an X rating, which would have limited its release and destroyed its box office potential. Paramount had no choice but to edit it down to just 10 seconds of screen time. For actress Debbie Sue Voorhees, it was a grueling introduction. Her very first day on set was spent filming that scene for over 13 hours under harsh lighting. When the cut footage was finally removed, most of that effort vanished, leaving behind only a quick glimpse. Ironically, those few seconds caused the biggest controversy, cementing the film's reputation as the most provocative entry in the entire franchise. Fact number 5, an actress lost her teaching career because of this film. Years after Friday the 13th Part 5, Debbie Sue Voorhees left Hollywood and became a teacher in Texas and New Mexico. For years, her acting past was just trivia until her students found her scenes online. Word spread through the school like wildfire, and soon administrators got involved. Despite being a respected educator, she was fired by 2 districts, told her past was inappropriate for the classroom, and even banned from attending her own students' graduation ceremony. It was a devastating experience that haunted her for years. But instead of retreating, she leaned into her legacy. She rejoined the horror community, appeared at conventions, and even directed her own fan-driven thriller called 13 Fanboy. It's a story that turned personal loss into a kind of horror movie redemption arc. Fact number 6. Debbie Sue's last name helped her get the role. Sometimes fate has a sense of humor. When casting began for Friday the 13th Part 5, the producers noticed an actress on the list with the last name Voorhees, exactly the same as Jason's. They thought it had to be a prank, but Debbie Sue Voorhees was real, and that coincidence actually helped her land the part. The team joked that it was destiny and brought her in to audition. Even though she had no relation to the fictional killer, her name alone became a clever publicity tool. Horror magazines ran headlines about the real Voorhees girl, giving the film free attention before it even hit theaters. Decades later, fans still bring it up at conventions, asking if she's somehow connected to Jason's twisted family tree. Debbie Sue laughs it off, saying her only link to the legend was pure luck. But it's the kind of coincidence Hollywood loves to build myths around. Fact number 7. Roy Burns has the highest body count in the franchise. You might assume Jason Voorhees owns the record for on-screen kills, but in A New Beginning, it's actually the imposter, Roy Burns, who holds the crown. Across the movie, he racks up 17 confirmed victims, a number that outslashed Jason's totals in every previous film. For a 1985 horror flick, that was outrageous. Each kill was designed to feel quick and brutal, with minimal setup and maximum shock. The stunt team had to reset bodies, props, and blood rigs over and over to keep pace with the script's breakneck rhythm. At the time, no other slasher villain had reached that many in a single entry. Even though fans were disappointed that it wasn't the real Jason behind the mask, Roy's ruthless spree quietly made history. It proved that even a copycat could make the carnage count. Fact number 8. The killer wasn't Jason, but a paramedic in disguise. This is where audiences lost their minds. After 4 straight movies featuring Jason Voorhees, Part 5 pulled a shocking twist. The killer wasn't Jason at all. It was Roy Burns, a paramedic driven mad after his son Joey was murdered early in the film. In his grief, Roy adopted Jason's look to get revenge. The studio wanted to keep Jason's mythology alive while trying something new, but viewers didn't buy it. When the hockey mask came off in theaters, fans gasped, and not in a good way. Letters poured into Paramount demanding the real Jason come back. Even the cast was confused. Some didn't realize the big reveal until they saw the final cut. The backlash was so fierce that the studio revived Jason in the very next film, undoing the imposter storyline completely. Still, the bold twist makes A New Beginning one of the most talked about chapters in the franchise. Fact number 9, 3 different actors played the killer. When you watch the movie closely, Jason's body language changes from scene to scene. And there's a reason for that. 3 different performers actually portrayed the killer. Actor Dick Wyand handled all of Roy Burns' unmasked scenes, while stuntman Tom Morga performed most of the masked kills. Then, when Morga wasn't available, another stunt performer named John Hawk stepped in for the big barn finale. That last stunt, where the killer falls onto a tractor's equipment, was considered too dangerous for the main cast. The result is a patchwork performance, sometimes slow and robotic, sometimes fast and twitchy. Fans didn't realize the switch-ups for years until behind-the-scenes photos surfaced showing different body builds under the same blue-gray lighting. It's a small detail, but it explains why Jason seems to fight like 3 completely different people, because he literally was. Fact number 10. The actor playing Roy received no direction. Dick Wyand, the man behind the unmasked Roy Burns, had one of the most confusing jobs on set. He later said the director gave him almost no guidance about the character's motives or even that he was the film's villain. To prepare, Wyand rented Friday the 13th Part 3 himself just to study how Jason moved. On set, Steinmann rarely spoke to him, focusing instead on the stunt team and camera setups. Wyand joked that he didn't fully understand his role until he watched the completed movie in theaters. "I found out I was the killer with everyone else," he said years later. The lack of direction explains Roy's strange, detached presence in the final act. He isn't just unhinged, he's almost expressionless. What started as confusion accidentally turned into a chilling performance that fit the tone perfectly. Fact number 11. The lead actor wasn't allowed to do his own stunts. When Dick Wyand signed on to play Roy Burns, he assumed he'd get to handle the killer's physical scenes. After all, he'd worked in television and knew how to take small hits and falls, but Hollywood union rules were strict. Only professional stunt performers could do those jobs. Even simple actions like breaking through a door or swinging a machete were off limits. Wien was frustrated, convinced it made his performance less authentic. The stunt coordinator, however, wasn't budging. It wasn't about talent, it was about keeping stuntmen employed and safe. In interviews, Wien joked that he ended up being the least active killer in slasher history. Ironically, the limited movement made Roy seem even creepier. His slow, stiff body language gave the character a cold, mechanical presence that fans later found unsettling. Sometimes restrictions lead to accidental brilliance, and Roy's unnerving stillness became part of what makes his scenes so memorable today. Fact number 12. Corey Feldman's cameo was filmed in his backyard. Fans of the final chapter were thrilled to see Corey Feldman return, but few knew how last minute that cameo was. By the time A New Beginning started filming, Feldman was already busy shooting The Goonies. There was no way he could return for full scenes, so Paramount sent a tiny crew to Feldman's house and filmed his brief dream sequence in his own backyard. They shot the scene in just a few hours using creative camera angles to make it look like part of the main set. Feldman didn't even have to leave home. When he saw the finished film, he admitted he was surprised his small scene got such a dramatic buildup. Marketing heavily promoted his return, making audiences believe he played a major role. In reality, Corey's appearance lasted under a minute, but it was enough to give fans closure and keep Tommy Jarvis's story connected to the franchise. Fact number 13. John Shepherd was devastated to learn it was a Friday the 13th film. John Shepherd wasn't just acting, he was method acting. He volunteered at a mental hospital, observed therapy sessions, and spent months studying the behavior of trauma survivors to prepare for what he thought was a serious character drama. When he found out that Repetition was actually Friday the 13th Part 5, he was heartbroken. He'd been hoping to make a powerful indie film about mental illness, not a gory slasher sequel. Despite his disappointment, Shepherd gave the role his all, portraying Tommy Jarvis as haunted and isolated. Ironically, his deep emotional approach added a surprising layer of realism to the film's tone. Fans later praised him for bringing more intensity to the role than most horror leads of the time. But Shepherd felt betrayed and left mainstream Hollywood soon after, shifting toward faith-based filmmaking. His journey remains one of the strangest method acting stories in horror history, training for drama only to end up in a blood-soaked franchise. Fact number 14. Tommy Jarvis was originally meant to become the next killer. In early drafts, A New Beginning was never meant to be just another Jason story. Paramount planned a full trilogy following Tommy Jarvis as he descended into madness, eventually taking on Jason's mantle himself. The ending, where Tommy holds the mask, was supposed to be the start of that arc. The idea was bold: make the hero the villain. But audiences rejected it immediately. Fans wanted Jason back, not a copycat or traumatized replacement. The backlash after Part 5's release was so loud that the studio abandoned the concept overnight. The next film, Jason Lives, revived the original killer and ignored Tommy's transformation completely. Looking back, the concept might have worked if the franchise had leaned into psychological horror instead of jump scares. But in 1985, fans weren't ready for a complex character study. They wanted their unstoppable monster. Fact number 15. Roy's coveralls were actually green, not blue. For decades, horror fans swore that Roy Burns wore blue coveralls, just like Jason, but that's not true at all. In reality, his jumpsuit was a muted spruce green. The confusion came from the way the movie was lit. Nearly every nighttime scene used heavy blue filters, which made the fabric appear navy on screen. Actor Dick Wyan confirmed this in interviews years later, even sharing behind-the-scenes photos showing the true color. Costume designer Stephen Lyman said the green outfit was intentional. It looked more like a real paramedic uniform, which fit Roy's day job. Ironically, the color change became a fan debate that lasted decades, with cosplayers and collectors arguing about the true shade. It's one of those strange details that proves how lighting, design, and camera tricks can create cinematic legends out of simple wardrobe choices. Fact number 16. The famous enchiladas scene was shot in freezing cold. It's one of the strangest and funniest moments in the entire Friday the 13th series. Demon Winters sitting in an outhouse singing to his girlfriend before meeting his fate. Actor Miguel Nunez Jr. improvised most of his lines, including the now iconic It's them damn enchiladas. What fans didn't know is that the scene was shot in miserable conditions. It was late at night, the temperature was near freezing, and the crew had no heaters for the outdoor set. Nunez Jr. had to sit for hours in a flimsy wooden outhouse surrounded by fog machines and mosquitoes. Between takes, he was wrapped in blankets and offered hot drinks just to stop shaking. Despite the discomfort, he kept cracking jokes, lifting the crew's spirits, and turning a silly scene into pure cult movie gold. Today, horror fans quote it endlessly, and Nunez Jr. says it's still the line people shout at him when they see him at conventions. Fact number 17. Nearly every character sings or dances before dying. You could call A New Beginning the most musical slasher movie ever made. Before meeting their end, nearly every victim hums, dances, or breaks into song. Demon croons his love song from the outhouse. Violet performs a robotic dance to pseudo-echoes His Eyes. And even smaller characters hum tunes moments before the chaos starts. Director Danny Steinmann encouraged it all. He said he wanted moments of lightness before the horror hit, something playful to contrast the brutality. The result was weirdly memorable. Fans later nicknamed it the disco slasher because of how rhythm and death seemed to go hand in hand. The mix of upbeat pop songs and sudden violence shouldn't work, but it gives the film a quirky personality that no other entry in the franchise has. To this day, when fans think of Part 5, they remember not just the kills, but the music and movement right before them. Fact number 18. A planned scene was changed to pass censorship. The original version of Violet's death scene was far more extreme. Steinmann initially wanted the attack to be symbolic, but the ratings board had been cracking down on horror movies, especially scenes that looked overly graphic. The filmmakers knew that if they pushed too far, they'd get an adults-only rating that would destroy box office sales. So, the sequence was rewritten and restaged to tone down the impact while keeping the shock. Instead of showing anything explicit, the camera focuses on Violet's terrified reaction and then cuts away. The change worked. The movie kept its R rating and avoided being pulled from mainstream theaters. Ironically, the censorship made the moment scarier. What the audience imagines is always worse than what's shown, and this simple adjustment turned an over-the-top idea into one of the film's most suspenseful moments. Fact number 19. The movie's editing style was inspired by adult films. Editor Bruce Green once gave a surprisingly honest explanation for the film's strange pacing. He said Part 5 was edited more like an adult movie than a traditional horror film. What he meant was that it jumped straight from one major scene to the next without much buildup or character development. The rhythm is fast, flashy, and focused on the highlights. Green admitted they didn't spend much time setting up personalities or motives, they just kept the story moving. While that might sound like a flaw, it's actually part of why the movie has such a strange charm today. It feels wild, unpredictable, and slightly disjointed, a non-stop rush of scenes that barely let the audience breathe. Some fans criticize it for lacking depth, while others celebrate it as pure popcorn chaos. Either way, that fast-cut editing style gave A New Beginning a pulse all its own. Fact number 20. The director later admitted his own struggles. Years after the film's release, Danny Steinmann reflected on his time making A New Beginning with surprising honesty. He spoke openly about struggling with stress, creative pressure, and the controversy that followed him throughout his career. The production had been intense, the deadlines brutal, and the fan backlash overwhelming. Steinmann admitted that his personality clashed with studio expectations and that he often felt out of control during the shoot. But despite all the turmoil, the movie still became a box office success. Made for about $2.2 million, it earned nearly $22 million worldwide. Paramount considered it a win, even if critics didn't. Over time, Steinmann's film found new life as a cult classic, appreciated for its raw, unpolished energy. It wasn't perfect, but it was unforgettable. And for a series built on shock value, that's exactly the kind of legacy that lasts.
I miss Joey already.
So do I.
Friday the 13th Part 5 remains the most controversial movie in the entire franchise. It had a director from an unexpected background, a lead actor who thought he was making an art film, and a killer who wasn't even Jason. Yet somehow, all those strange ingredients created one of the most fascinating entries in horror history. Behind the chaos, censorship battles, and unexpected coincidences, There's a story of risk-taking filmmakers who accidentally made something audiences couldn't stop talking about. So what do you think? Does Part 5 deserve its bad reputation? Or is it an underrated gem that just tried something different? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into horror's weirdest stories. Until next time, keep the lights on.